Daf Yomi, Tractate Avodah Zarah, page 38. Top of the page, with the words Ela midrabana nukras machtabi alma. Rather, the cooking of Gentiles is prohibited by rabbinic law. This is talking about what's permitted and not permitted from Gentiles. Disclaimer, I'm just reading the text, and if anything is offensive here to anyone looking at this video, don't shoot me, I'm just a messenger. I was reading the Talmud. Rather, the cooking of the Gentiles is prohibited by rabbinic law, and the verse is cited as a mere support. It's called asmachta. Amar Shmuel Yitzchak Rav Kol Anechal Kamos Chichu Chai Ein Bo Mishum Bishule Goyim Bisura Machnu Hachi Bepumdis Machnu Hachi Amar Rav Shmuel Rav Yitzchak Amar Rav Kol She'enu Nechal Al Shulchan Melachim Lapes Bo Esapas Ein Bo Mishum Bishule Goyim. The Gemara discusses the particulars of the prohibition against eating the cooking of Gentiles. Rav Shmuel Bar Yitzchak says that Rav says any item that is eaten as it is, raw, is not subject to the prohibition against eating the cooking of Gentiles. The Gemara remarks in the study hall in Surah, they taught it this way. In Pumbedita, they taught it like this. Rav Shmuel Bar Yitzchak says that Rav says any item that is not eaten together with bread on the table of kings is not subject to the prohibition against eating the cooking of Gentiles. In other words, foods that are not eaten by distinguished individuals are not subject to this prohibition. My binayu, ika binayu, dagim gedanim, be'arade evedaisa. The Gemara asks, what is the practical difference between these two opinions? The practical difference between them is with regard to small fish, mushrooms, and porridge. These foods are not eaten raw, but they are not eaten by distinguished individuals. Consequently, these foods are prohibited according to the version taught in Surah, but permitted according to the version taught in Pumbedita. Amar Ravasi Amar Rav Dagim Gedanim Elohim Ein Bahem Mishum Bishul Goyim Amar Yosef Im Tzalon Goy Somech Yisrael Lehem Yishmeru V'Shavshilin V'i Avidinu Goy Kasad Beharsana Asu. Ravasi says that Rav says small salted fish are not subject to the prohibition of the cooking of Gentiles, because they can be eaten raw. Rav Yosef says if a Gentile roasted these fish, a Jew may rely upon them for use in the midst of joining cooked foods, which must be prepared in order to permit cooking for Shabbat on a festival that occurs on a Friday. And if a Gentile made them into kasa de harsina, a dish of fish fried in oil and flour. Sounds like a schnitzel, fish, fried fish kind of thing, right? The dish is prohibited. In this case, since the flour had not been edible, it is considered the cooked food of a Gentile. Pshita. The Gemara asks, isn't that obvious? What reason would there be to think that kasa daharsana prepared by a Gentile is permitted? The Gemara answers, this is taught lest you say that the salted fish, which one is permitted to eat even if cooked by Gentiles, is the essential component. Therefore, Rav Yosef teaches us that the flour is the essential component, and the dish is therefore considered the cooked food of a Gentile. Amar Rav Baron Amar Rav Goy Shitzit Eto B'Agam Kol Hachagavim Sheb'Agam Asurim Hechidami Ilem Dela Yedak Haitao Haitame Ma Iria Goy Afilu Yisrael nami ela mishum bishul goyim. Rav Brona says that Rav says, in the case of a Gentile who ignited a fire in the meadow, all the locusts that were burned in the meadow are prohibited. The Gemara asks, what are the circumstances in this case? If we say that the reason they are prohibited is that one no longer knows which are kosher and which are non-kosher as a result of their burning, why does Rav Brona specifically discuss a case involving a Gentile? Even if a Jew burned in the meadow, they would also be prohibited for the same reason. Rather, this is referring to a case where all the locusts were kosher and the prohibition is due to the cooking of Gentiles, as the locusts were effectively cooked by a Gentile. Ki hai gavna miyasil ve'amar Chanan va'ami amar Pedaz amar Yochanan hai goy dicharichei shesherei le'mechavina afil nechshona amma la'borisea kamich kavin hachanami legaloye agama kamechavin. The Gemara raises an objection. Does anyone actually prohibit the cooking of Gentiles in a case like this? But doesn't Rav Hanan Bar Ami say that Rabbi Padat says that Rabbi Yochanan says with regard to this Gentile who singed the head of an animal, it is permitted to eat part of it, even from the tip of the ear, which is fully cooked? The Gemara remarks, evidently this is permitted because the Gentile merely intends to remove the hair and not to cook the ears. Here, too, it ought to be permitted because he merely intends to clear the meadow, not to cook the locusts. Le'oilam, the Gemara answers, actually, this is referring to a case where there is a mixture of different types of locusts, and they are prohibited because one does not know which are kosher and which are non-kosher. And the reason Rav Brona specified that the case involved a Gentile is because the incident that occurred happened to have occurred with the involvement of a Gentile. Gufa Amar Rama Baba Chana Yochanan Hai goy dicharichei shari lemechavina afil meshoni aber Ravina elkach hai goy shazi kita leatuna ukvar ba Yisrael krami kara shapir dami b'shita ma hu yiteu l'shel b'nav v'kol mechavin k'mashpelon l'shroi b'nakam rafin. The Gemara addresses the matter itself. Rabba Bar Hanan says that Rabbi Yochanan says, with regard to this Gentile who singed the head of an animal, it is permitted to eat part of it, even from the tip of the ear, which is fully cooked. Ravina said, therefore, with regard to this Gentile who threw a moist peg into the oven in order to dry it out and harden it, and a Jew had already inserted a gourd in the oven from the outset, the gourd is permitted, even though it was in effect cooked by a Gentile. The reason is that the Gentile had no intention to cook the vegetable. The Gemara asks, isn't that obvious? The Gemara answers, it wasn't necessary to teach this, lest you say that the Gentile intends to cook the vessel, meaning the peg, by softening it. Therefore, Ravina teaches us that he intends only to harden the vessel. Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Shmuel, Aniach Yisrael, Aniach Yisrael, Gabe Gachalim, Uvagoy Havagoy Muta, Heridami. Ile Madi lo Avach Behava Bashim, Pshita, Elalav Dila, Hafech La, Hafech Bashim, Amay Muta, Yeshua Goyim. The Gemara continues discussion with regard to the cooking of Gentiles by examining the halacha of meat cooked both by a Gentile and a Jew. Rabbi Yehuda says that Shmuel says if a Jew placed meat upon flaming coals and a Gentile came and turned the meat over, the meat is permitted. Gemara asks, what are the circumstances of this case? If we say that it is the case where if the Gentile had not turned over the meat, it would have cooked anyway. It is obvious that the meat is permitted, as the Gentile's actions did not actually alter the food. The Gemara suggests rather, is it not a case where if the Gentile had not turned it over, it would not have cooked? But if so, why is it permitted? In such a case, the meat is certainly considered to be the cooking of Gentiles and ought to be prohibited. Lo tzricha di'ira fecha v'mishir v'tardeshai the Gemara explains, no. It is necessary to teach this halacha with regard to a case where if the Gentile had not turned over the meat, it would have cooked in 2 hours. Now that he did not turn it over, it will cook in only 1 hour. Lest you say that hastening the cooking process is a significant matter, and therefore food whose preparation is expedited by Gentiles prohibited. Ravina teaches this otherwise. The Gemara asks, but doesn't Rabbi Asi say that Rabbi Yochanan says any item that has been cooked like the food of Ben Drosai, being partially cooked, so that it is just about edible. Ben Drosai was a thief and he was always on the run, so he had to cook his food very quickly. That's how the story goes. It's not subject to the prohibition of cooking of Gentiles. Consequently, if it is not cooking the food of Ben Drosai, it is subject to the prohibition of the cooking of Gentiles. Accordingly, meat whose cooking was expedited by a Gentile ought to be prohibited, as this ruling includes cases where it had not been cooked like the food of Ben Drosai at the time of the Gentile's intervention. The Gemara answers there, Rabbi Asi was referring to a case where the Jew had placed the meat that was not yet cooked like the food of Ben Drosai in a basket where it would not have cooked at all. And the Gentile took it and placed it in the oven. Rabbi Asi was teaching that in such a case where the current cooking process has yet to begin, the meat is prohibited if it had not already been cooked like the food of Ben Drosai. By contrast, in the case addressed by Rabbi Yehuda, the meat was already cooking and the Gentile's actions hastened the process, but did not initiate it. In other words, the issue of cooked food, like the food of Ben Drosai, is relevant only if the Gentile takes a dish that is not being cooked at present. Tanya Namiyachi. מבית הכנסת או מבית המדרש ואינו חושש שופטת איש הקדר אגב הכירה בזגויה. The Gemara adds, this too is also taught in a Braita. A Jew may place meat on hot coals and let a Gentile come and turn it over, as necessary if the Jew comes back from the synagogue or from the study hall, and the Jew need not be concerned for the prohibition of eating cooking of Gentiles. Similarly, a Jewish woman may set a pot upon the stove and let a Gentile woman come. Now we're turned to 38b. And stir it until she comes back from the bathhouse or from the synagogue, and she need not be concerned. Okay, take a little break to continue with the boiler. And we're back with the boiler. Boil, we're talking about cooking, so maybe it's appropriate that it's a boiler. boiler near goy, Yisrael ma'u, Rav Nachman Yisrael, Kal b'chol v'gam lo b'yad, goy muto, Kamal b'yad Yisrael lo yikosh echein, v'namar amen. A dilemma was raised before the sages. If a Gentile placed meat on a fire and a Jew turned it over, what is the halacha? Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak said the halacha can be derived by an a fortiori inference if the meat is permitted when it finished cooking by the hand of a Gentile, then where it had finished cooking by the hand of a Jew, all the more so, is it not clear that it should be permitted? Yitzmanami Amar Rabbi Bar Chana Rabbi Yochanan Amrila Amar Bacha Bar Chana Amar Rabbi Yochanan Amar Rav Acha Bar Chana. Very interesting. There's Acha Bar Chana and Rav Bar Chana. There's two Bar Chanas. Anyway, Ben Sheniach Koyach Yisrael. Ben Sheniach Yisrael. Is he the only time? Rav Acha Bar Chana. I got it. Is he the only time in the Shas that this comes up? Rav Acha Bar Chana or Yochanan. We never see him in all Shas, and all of a sudden now, it's on Avodah Zarah. Very interesting. I wonder if it's not just like I don't know, Avodah Zarah. 38b. Who is this person? Okay, look at it. Okay. Ben sheniach v'chol Yisrael v'niach v'chol v'chol v'nosot shteheta segavim b'yakol. Along these lines, it was also stated, Rabbi Bar Chana says that Rabbi Yochanan says, and some say it was Rabbi Acha Bar Chana says that Rabbi Yochanan says. Do we ever encounter this Rabbi Acha Bar Yochanan anywhere in Shas besides for here? That's what I like to know. That's what I would like to know. Well, that's why we do these things. Let's continue. What did he say anyway? Rabbi Yochanan, when the Gentile placed the meat on the fire, the Jew turned it over, or whether the Jew placed the meat on the fire, the Gentile turned it over, the meat is permitted and is not prohibited unless it's cooking from the beginning to end performed by the hand of a Gentile. Okay. Jackie Mason, Jews, Gentile. By the way, it's the yard site, the English yard site, July 24th. Jews and a Gentile. Jew comes in here. Gentile. I don't know. Hey, you, Mister. Hey. Anyway, yeah, he was definitely one of a kind. I was giving a class, a lecture in the synagogue. I made a few jokes here and there, and I realized that people come for the jokes. Oh boy. Amar Ravina, harifta de shagar goy, ve for Yisrael inam shagar, Yisrael goy inam shagar goy, ve goy. Now I see where he gets his stuff from. It's just like this, like micro-analytical. It's Talmudic thinking. That's what it is. Ravina says the halacha is that this bread baked in an oven that a Gentile lit and a Jew subsequently baked, or alternatively, if a Jew lit the oven and a Gentile baked, or alternatively, even if a Gentile lit and a Gentile baked, and a Jew came and stoked the coals and the heat in the fire, it's permitted. As the action of the Jew speeds up the baking process, okay? Dagmalia Chizkiya Shari Rabbi Yochanan Asal Betzat Akbar Shari Rabbi Yochanan Asal Kiyas Odim Yomam Echad Dagmalia Betzat Chizkiya Rabbi Yochanan Asal. The Gemara continues with regard to fish salted by a Gentile. Chizkiya deems it permitted, Rabbi Yochanan deems it prohibited. As for an egg roasted by a Gentile, Bar Kapar deems it permitted, and Rabbi Yochanan deems it prohibited. When the Rav Dimi came from Eretz Yisrael to Babylonia, he said with regard to both salted fish and eggs, Chizkiya and Bar Kapara deemed them permitted, permitted them, even if they were prepared by Gentile, and Rabbi Yochanan deemed them prohibited. Rab Chia Paraba Yiklal Beresh Galuta into the realm of the Resh Galuta. Amrevis of Suleban Amru, Hiski Barkaparashu. Rabbi Yochanan Zarah and the Resh Yamakom Shnaim Belguras Bid. Lord Titulea, Hamad, Yekos of the Yochanan, Ashkuye Nagota, Yechal of the dream. The Gemara relates a relevant incident. Rabbi Chia of Parva arrived at the home of the exilarch, the Reish Galuta, whose attendant said to him, with regard to an egg roasted by a Gentile, what is the halacha? Rabbi Chia said to them, Chizkiah and Bar Kapara deem it permitted, and Rabbi Yochanan deems it prohibited. And the statement of one sage has no standing in a place where it is contradicted by two, meaning the halacha is not in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yochanan because he is in the minority. Whereas Zvid said to them, do not listen to him, as this is what Abaye said. The halacha is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yochanan. Due to the stringency of Rav Zvid sought to impose, the attendants gave Rav Zvid a cup of spiced vinegar to drink, and he died as a result. Did he have to drink it? Why did he drink it? That's how Zvid met his end, by drinking a cup of spiced vinegar. Negota dechala. Wow. Tana Rabbanan, Nakafrisin Makalapot, Tekalotapot, Bamidalia, Hamagala, Hemuta, Vetsat, Sevia Shaman, Barav Yehuda, Nasi, Ubet Dino, Nimnula Vitivu. The Gemara continues to discuss the halachic status of various foods with regard to the prohibition against eating the cooking of Gentiles. The sages taught in Braita, caper buds or kafrisin, and leeks, kafladot, and matalaya, hot water, and roasted grains that belong to Gentiles and were cooked by them are permitted. An egg roasted by Gentiles is prohibited. With regard to oil, Rabbi Yehuda and his court were counted and voted on the matter. His court were counted. Yeah, they voted on the matter and permitted it. Okay. Tanya hi amatalaya, hi pashilaya, hi shata my shiata. Amrava baru l'chamar yochlan. Arbain shanin alikaya v'shavim Yisrael. V'rava baru l'chamar ne'amar. Ashitin shnin Tinafik ha'odam b'Mitzrayim. V'lat ligi mar b'shnei u'mar b'shnei. It is taught in a Braita. Matalia is the same as the black-eyed pea, which is also called shiata. What is shiata? Rabbi Bar Chana says that Rabbi Yochanan says it is 40 years since this item emerged from Egypt, and it was imported here. And Rabbi Bar Chana himself said it is 60 years since this item emerged from Egypt, and it was imported here. So he argues on his rabbi. The Gemara remarks, and they do not disagree, as one sage issued his statement in his year, and the other sage issued it. Oh, they didn't. Wow. So Rabbi Baruch, I guess. So 20 years had passed until he said this. Whereas 60 years had passed from the time of Rabbi Baruch, only 40 years had elapsed from Rabbi Yochanan issued his statement. Okay. Interesting. It's like if I said something in 2005 and then if someone said, and then only now, 2025, you're saying something. My גרגישתא ומדבקין בי ויעלין לבני דווקא in brackets it says אדרפקי מלבבי ואחרי מניו וקרי מבין תדרשיו עטורפה דחריו אמר רבשי אמר לי רב חנינא אמר לי רבי חנינא מילין ואמרי לה במילין. Okay. The Gemara describes the preparation of shiata. They take parsley seeds and flax root and fenugreek root and soak them together in lukewarm water and leave them until they sprout. And then they take new earthenware pots and fill them with water and soak red clay in them. And then stick the seeds and roots in the clay. And after that, they go to the bathhouse, and by the time they come out, the plants have blossomed, and they eat from them. And as they eat from them, they cool down from the heat of the bathhouse and from the hair of their head until the toenails of their feet. And Ravashi says, Rav Chanina said to me, these are mere words, meaning this is false, as it is impossible for the plants to blossom so quickly. And some say this was performed by means of magic words, which caused the plants to grow faster. Tandur Abanan Hakuspan shel goyim shechom chamin chama brackets chamav v'yorech gilo elas v'yorgetanu utam ve'eza hi yorgetana Amar Rabiana kol shein tzipor dero yachol likanes bitocha. The sages taught a Braita the halacha with regard to date husks that belong to Gentiles that were heated in hot water depends on the size of the pot in which they were prepared. If they were cooked in a large pot, they are prohibited, as prohibited foods are often cooked in large pots. If they were cooked in a small pot, they are permitted because non-kosher foods, which are unusually large, are not generally cooked in these pots, and it is therefore reasonable to assume that the pot has not absorbed a prohibited substance. The Gemara asks, and what is a small pot? Rabbi Yanai says, it is any pot that is so small that a swallow cannot enter into it. The Gemara challenges, but even if non-kosher foods are not generally cooked in pots this size, perhaps they sliced the food into smaller pieces and inserted them into the small pot. Since large non-kosher foods can be cooked in small pots, once they have been sliced, the concern should apply to these pots as well. The Gemara accepts this point and amends Rihanna's definition. Rather, a small pot is any pot that is so small that a swallow's head cannot enter into it. Such small pots would not be used to cook even sliced non-kosher foods. Tanya, the Gemara raises a difficulty. When the rice up. The Gemara raises difficulty, but in any case, isn't it taught in Braita that food cooked in both a large pot and a small pot is permitted? This directly contradicts the Braita cited here, which permits only food cooked in a small pot. The Gemara answers it is not difficult, as this first Braita cited above is written in accordance with the one who says the prohibited substance that imparts flavor to the detriment of the mixture is prohibited, whereas the Braita mentioned here that is written in accordance with the one who says a prohibited substance that imparts flavor to the detriment of the mixture is permitted. Now, a lot of sheishes, we can do this. Wow. Okay. Amar sheishes hay mishcha shlika dramai asu Amar Safra my Yehoshua im shum aro emisor sari im shum bishulei goyim nechalu kemo shechai shul chai im shum yuli goyim notzin tam levgam hu umutal. What's he saying? No, Avodah. Rav Sheshet says this oil that was cooked by an Aramean is prohibited. Rav Sofer rejected this ruling and said, with regard to what need we be concerned? If it is due to the concern that it might have been mixed with the wine used for an idolatrous libation, this cannot be correct, as wine ruins oil, and therefore Gentiles would not mix them together. If it is due to the prohibition against eating of the cooking of Gentiles, this also cannot be, because oil is eaten as it is, being raw. And if it is due to the oil being cooked in vessels of Gentiles that require purging, on account of the prohibited taste that they have the Zarah, and now the forbidden flavor from the vessels and the food, this concern is also invalid, as the absorbed substance is one that imparts flavor to the detriment of the mixture, and in this case, the mixture is permitted. The sages raised a dilemma for Vasi with regard to these boiled dates of an Aramean. What is the halacha? The Gemara interjects, do not raise the dilemma with regard to sweet dates, as they are certainly permitted since they can be eaten raw. Similarly, do not raise the dilemma with regard to bitter dates, as they are certainly prohibited since they are rendered edible through cooking. Rather, let the dilemma be raised with regard to dates whose flavor is moderate, neither sweet nor bitter. What is the halacha? Rabbi Asi said to them, what is your dilemma? The halacha is clear, as my teacher prohibited such dates. The Gemara asks, and who was the Rabbi Asi's teacher? Levi. Shetita Rav Shari Avodah Shmuel Levi Asiri. Bichidush Usiari Kulia Malabli Zadishari Vitalofche Dechalu Kulia Malabli Gideasir. Kibli Beta Betelavche de Mayama Saval de Gazrinan Ha Atuha Mar Saval Gazrinan. With regard to Shetita, a sweet porridge made from roasted grains and honey, Rav deemed it permitted even when it was prepared by Gentile, whereas Shmuel's father and Levi deemed it prohibited. The Gemara elaborates with regard to shtia, made of wheat or barley. Everyone agrees that it is permitted. Similarly, with regard to shetita'ah, prepared from lentils, to which vinegar is added, everyone agrees that it is prohibited on account of the vinegar of Gentiles. When they disagree is with regard to lentils made with only water. One sage, Levi, holds that we decree a prohibition with regard to this porridge made without vinegar due to that porridge made with vinegar. And one sage, Rav, holds that we do not decree for this reason. The Gemara notes, and some say, that with regard to lentils made only with water, everyone agrees that the shetita'ah is prohibited only on account of lentils made with vinegar. When they disagree, it is with regard to shetita'ah made of wheat and barley. One sage, Levi, holds that we decree a prohibition with regard to this porridge prepared with wheat and barley due to that porridge made with lentils. And one sage, Rav, holds that we do not decree for this reason. Amar Rav. Wow, we're almost done. Nice. Amar Rav Tremine Shetita'ah Shadr Barzilai Hagiladi LeDavid Tichtiv Yishkav V'sapot Tochli Yoter Chitim Usorim V'kemach V'kali Upol V'adashim V'kali V'hashta Ha'adika Mapki Tzani L'shugid Narda'a V'let D'chaish Deha De'avu D'shmuel V'levi. Apropos the mention of Shetita'ah, the Gemara relates that Rav said Barzilai the Gileadite sent two kinds of Shetita'ah to David, as is written, and Barzilai the Gileadite of Rogelim brought beds and basins and earthen vessels and wheat and barley and meal and parched grain and beans and lentils and parched pulse. 2 Samuel 17:28. Barzillai bar two kinds of parched foods, grain and pulse. The Gemara concludes, and now shetita is taken out in baskets upon baskets to the markets in Avodah, and there is no one who is concerned about the stringent ruling of Shmuel's father Levi. Ukibashtin darkan l'seis b'tochen yain amar chizki l'shanel shedarkan aval b'yadua asur afilu b'hana ומה ישנן ממורayos תשארו הבנו מהנה הסר לעבור זוהמה החל למתוקי טעמה. The Mishnah teaches, and boil and pickle vegetables of Gentiles, whose usual manner of preparation involves adding wine and vinegar to them, may not be consumed, but one may derive benefit from them. Chizki says they taught that this prohibition applies solely to consumption only where their usual manner of preparation involves adding wine and vinegar. Though there is no information about how these particular vegetables were prepared, but where it is known for certain that these vegetables were prepared with wine and vinegar, it is prohibited even to derive benefit from them. The Gemara asks, and in what way is this case different from fish stew, which the sages permitted one to derive benefit from? The Gemara answers there, with regard to fish stew, wine is added merely to remove the stench of the fish and does not actually contribute any taste to it. Whereas here, with regard to pickled vegetables, it is added to sweeten the taste. Rabbi Yochanan Amar, afilu b'yedu adam mutar, ma yishna mimorayas, la b'mei adas b'yano. The Gemara cites a dissenting opinion, and Rabbi Yochanan says even where it is known that wine or vinegar was added to the vegetables, it is also permitted to derive benefit from them. The Gemara asks, and in what way is this case different from fish stew? According to the opinion of Rabbi Meir, who prohibited deriving benefit from the fish stew, why does Rabbi Meir permit one to derive benefit from vegetables pickled in Gentiles' wine, but prohibit deriving benefit from fish stew that contains wine or vinegar?